Evening.
All right.
The natives are restless.
They are.
There
A lot of conversation going on.
There is. Hopefully, about all of God's word.
I'm sure they're talking about 1 Samuel 26.
I'm sure they are. They're comparing notes beforehand. Figure out what they got. Somebody's like, hey, can I borrow your sheet?
What do you think?
I said three.
That's the wrong book.
Refresh.
How are we doing this evening?
Wonderful. How are you?
Raring to go. I am quite blessed. Really am. It's been a good day.
Oh, I didn't close one over there.
Oh.
So I got to close one over there so we'll be
Hold on. Yeah, because we're not doing Luke 15.
We could.
Good.
It's a great sermon.
Could step up into that.
Yeah. We talked about it last night.
Need a warm-up cycle on it? Anyways, we're in 1 Samuel chapter 26. Well, the pastor goes and closes his notes so he can open them up over here and have his notes for the study this evening. I try to use this excuse and he just looks at me funny. For him, it's okay. Anyways, so we've last time we talked about Samuel 25. That was Nabal and his wife and Abigail and all those things that came together in that. We saw David be spared from acting unrighteously, of course, against Nabal and all the men of his family. And Abigail stepped in at the Lord's will there and saved him from that. Today we're moving on into 1 Samuel chapter 26. Which is going to feel probably, did anybody think this felt like a rinse and repeat of 24?
Yep.
Yeah, it does quite a bit, doesn't it?
Very simple. Even the people coming up and saying, hey,
yeah.
Saul, I know where they said.
So,
and he's in the same place.
It's in the same place. Yeah, we'll talk about that.
In case you didn't know.
We're going to be looking into 1 Samuel chapter 26. David spares Saul again. Okay. So, guess we'll go ahead and move into summary while Pastor decides to join us. There he is. We're moving into summary. We kind of did a recap on 25 real quick while you were gone.
Okay, great.
And moving on into today's work. So, summarizing things here. Once again, the Ziphites come to Saul and inform him that David is hiding in their hills. Saul, despite all of his previous promises not to harm David, is aroused against him and picks up his spear and calls upon his 3,000 favorite henchmen to follow him into the hills of Ziph to flush out David. Saul's hordes set up camp on the edge of the wilderness, and David receives word from his spies that Saul has indeed come in search of him with his spear again. During the night, David approaches the camp where he can see that Saul and his commander, cousin Abner, are in the middle of the 3,000 soldiers snoozing away, and David decides to walk on over to where Saul is sleeping, and Abishai agrees to go with him. The two sneak into the camp, which is sleeping deeply by the Lord's will, and come to where Saul is. Abishai says they should take the opportunity to use Saul's spear to kill him, but David once again stays the hand of the one that would seek to take Saul's life, reminding Abishai that Saul is still the Lord's anointed. So instead, they take Saul's spear and water jug and sneak back out of the camp and up the hill. Then David calls out Abner for not sufficiently guarding the anointed king of the Lord and uses the king's spear and water jug to prove his point. Saul recognizes David's voice and calls out to him. David proceeds to again remind Saul that he means no evil towards him, and Saul is again forced to recognize the folly of his ways and professes to repent again for seeking David's life. David chastises Saul a bit, and they again go their separate ways as Saul returns home and David back into the wilderness.
Very nice.
Very nice.
I like some of your wording, the whore.
He's a wordsmith.
At this time, that's a horde. So, let's talk about theme. What do we get for our main themes on this one?
Rinse and repeat.
I already said that.
It was easy.
Good. It does kind of fit.
Saul didn't learn the first time not to go after David.
Saul didn't learn that. That's right. He definitely didn't. What else we got?
no matter the circumstances, always do what is right.
That seems to be a recurring thing in the story.
Yeah, yeah.
Except in the middle of this.
Do what's wrong.
What'd you
But never consider evil to be dead. It'll return over and over, which is always an opportunity to defeat it again and again with your faith in the Lord.
You can't turn your mic on.
I think it is.
Don't ever listen to the Ziphites.
I could be wrong.
Yeah. There it is. Now, you want to repeat your theme?
We all heard.
Never.
Sorry.
I think they should repeat my thing. Because they just heard it.
So I took a slightly different bent just because I felt like that the theme is kind of repetitive in nature, although I do really like yours about the evil coming back. I said, a fool that lives righteously in his own eyes is often caught sleeping when the Lord moves.
That's good. Okay, I'll take that.
So,
But I like how you said David snuck into camp. He didn't really have to sneak because they were in a deep sleep and God put him there. He could have just come in with tambourine. Hey, I'm here.
I wonder at which point,
Break through it.
I do wonder at which point they decided, hey, this seems unnatural.
That might have been putting God to the test, though.
It
It might have been.
He could have come in with that theme music we
That's right. He's like,
Now, I don't quite understand something though. David got on Abner's case when it tells you in the word that the Lord made him sleep. So.
But does David know that he made us sleep?
No.
Yeah, we know.
Yeah, we know because we can read what is written in the Word. We don't know that David actually knew that.
I don't think that's the point of him calling him out.
And we'll talk about that when we get to the later point. But how many sections we get?
Well,
You got
I
five?
went with 5.
Five.
I could have trimmed
And
it to
5?
4. I know you were starting with 3
Yeah,
earlier.
4? I ended with 3.
But I could have put, I see where I started putting my first 2 sections together as one. So I probably could have ended with 3 as well, but I kind of separated them out a little bit.
I think the longer I go into this cycle, the more I end up with bigger sections.
Yeah.
Almost at 25.
One of these days I'm going to make you justify that.
You can dig something out of each part.
The horse slipped.
Anyways, was there another hand? No?
Casey, you had 5?
Casey had 5, yeah. So, I got 3 sections for the 25 verses. So at least we have some ground to dispute. Pete, what were your
Well, you
sections?
probably went 1 through 8, 9 through 20, and 21 through 25. That's my guess. But I went 1 through 4. The Ziphites sell out David again. 5 through 8, 9 through 12, 13 through 20, and 21 through 25.
Gotcha. Okay. So what I did was section 1 being Saul goes back on the hunt for David. I just did verses 1 through 3 there.
Me too.
Kind of the process. Okay. So you did the same there.
Yeah, I started at 1 through 3, and then I added 4.
Now I did verses 4 through 12 as section 2.
Me too.
There you go. The fool falls asleep and the godly man saves his life. Is where I got there. And then I just did David confronts Saul with the truth again, verses 13 through 25.
I just broke out the Abner section,
Okay,
13 to
gotcha.
16.
Yeah, that's not unreasonable at all there. So you picked it back up where Saul hears his voice, basically?
Mhm.
Okay.
Well, and I just did, when I did 13 through 20, I was like, David addresses Saul, and then 21 through 25, Saul sees the error of his ways and sends David away again.
That's fair.
The,
It's not right, but it's fair.
That's an acceptable way to look at it.
Acceptable.
I changed it a couple times because this is the way the Lord led me.
You sure what you're saying?
I said it.
Oh.
I don't feel judged by you.
You've been hanging around Hunter too long. That
I
sounds
told him
exactly like
that
something he would say.
I told him that last night. I said, him and Donna were gonna have to separate.
The leads all men down the same path. Yep. Anywho, so the sections to focus on. Frankly, I'll be honest with you, I kind of focus on sections 2 and 3, which are the primary body of the text. Did you have a particular
No,
focal
I'm with you.
point? Okay. So let's go ahead and read I'll just pick it up in verse 4. I decided to go all the way to the end of the text because I keep having to double check myself as I go which verse I ended on, and it drives me nuts. If I just go all the way to the end, then I'll do that. So, verse 4, 1 Samuel chapter 26. David therefore sent out spies and understood that Saul had indeed come. So David arose and came to the place where Saul had encamped. And David saw the place where Saul lay, and Abner the son of Ner, the commander of his army. Now Saul lay within the camp, with the people encamped all around him. Then David answered and said to Ahimelech the Hittite, and to Abishai the son of Zeruiah, brother of Joab, saying, Who will go down with me to Saul in the camp? And Abishai said, I will go down with you. So David and Abishai came to the people by night, and there Saul lay sleeping within the camp, with his spear stuck in the ground by his head, and Abner and the people lay all around him. Then Abishai said to David, God has delivered your enemy into your hand this day. Now therefore, please let me strike him at once with his spear, right to the earth, and I will not have to strike him a second time. But David said to Abishai, Do not destroy him, for who can stretch out his hand against the Lord's anointed and be guiltless? David said furthermore, As the Lord lives, the Lord shall strike him, for his day shall come to die, and he shall go out to battle and perish. Or he shall go out to battle and perish. The Lord forbid that I should stretch out my hand against the Lord's anointed. But please, take now the spear and the jug of water that are by his head, and let us go. So David took the spear and the jug of water by Saul's head, and they got away. And no man saw or knew it or awoke, for they were all asleep, because a deep sleep from the Lord had fallen on them. Now David went over to the other side and stood on the top of the hill, afar off, a great distance being between them. And David called out to the people and to Abner the son of Ner, saying, Do you not answer, Abner? Then Abner answered and said, Who are you calling out to the king? So David said to Abner, Are you not a man? And who is like you in Israel? Why then have you not guarded your lord the king? For one of the people came in to destroy your lord the king. This thing that you have done is not good. As the Lord lives, you deserve to die, because you have not guarded your master, the Lord's anointed. And now see where the king's spear is, and the jug of water that was by his head. Then Saul knew David's voice and said, Is that your voice, my son David? And David said, It's my voice, my lord, O king.
Dude's bipolar, man.
Well, he's just wiping the sleep out of his eyes. I'm not sure what's going on there. And he said, Why does my lord thus pursue his servant? For what have I done? Or what evil is in my hand? Now therefore, please let my lord the king hear the words of his servant. If the Lord has stirred you up against me, let him accept an offering. But if it is the children of men, may they be cursed before the Lord. For they have driven me out this day from sharing in the inheritance of the Lord, saying, Go serve other gods. So now, do not let my blood fall on the earth before the face of the Lord. For the king of Israel has come out to seek a flea. And when one hunts a partridge, as when one hunts a partridge in the mountains. Then Saul said, I have sinned. Return, my son David, for I will harm you no more, because my life was precious in your eyes this day. Indeed, I have played the fool and erred exceedingly. And David answered and said, Here is the king's spear. Let one of your young men come over and get it. May the Lord repay every man for his righteousness and his faithfulness. For the Lord delivered you into my hand today. But I would not stretch out my hand against the Lord's anointed. And indeed, as your life was valued much this day in my eyes, so let my life be valued much in the eyes of the Lord, and let him deliver me out of all tribulation. Then Saul said to David, May you be blessed, my son David. You shall both do great things and also still prevail. So David went on his way, and Saul returned to his place.
And nobody lived happily ever after.
Nobody. So, all the way back here. So we get this first part. Saul hears, okay, basically David's up in the hills, says the Ziphites, once again. And what's interesting is that's actually almost the exact same verbiage from chapter 24, that is if I say, hey, he's up in our hills. Perhaps you should go and get him, basically.
What's their problem?
The Ziphites, man.
They're just trying to get, some kind of recognition.
Yeah, they're trying to be on the
get
king
favor
side.
from him.
Yeah, they evidently feel that Saul and his 3,000 men can take him. So so he goes to sleep, and an interesting point back up just a little bit where they do go to sleep. So Saul encamped in the hill of Hakilah, which is opposite Jeshimon. The interesting part about that, which is not in this page right now, which is really helpful, is that Hakilah is the dark. Okay, so it's interesting to me that Saul chooses to sleep in darkness, which is where he lives.
Right.
He constantly does this.
He's consistent on that.
And then Jeshimon is the waste in the wilderness, which is where David's been hiding, basically, is up in the wilderness. So anyways, they do all this, and David cannot believe that Saul has come back out, right? And to your point, the nature of evil just keeps on returning.
Yeah.
And he is shocked by this, that Saul has come back out against him. And he sends out his spies to go check and say, hey, is that really Saul over there? I perchance see Saul in the distance. It's a man with a spear. Maybe that's him. And he's taller than everybody else, so who else would it be at this point?
Nobody else carries a spear around with them.
So I do like looking at that in terms of evil just continually rears its head, and has to be constantly dealt with in that way, and you have to be on alert for it, as his men are. Also, what's always interesting to me in this situation is David has a pretty good awareness of where Saul and his army is at all points in time. Saul seems to never know anything.
He just goes on and waits for somebody to come tell him.
Well, he knows the Ziphites are going to show up eventually.
Yeah.
So anyways, David goes down to the camp. What really sets this particular portion apart from chapter 24?
So, with him taking things from beside him, it really makes me go back and think about chapter 24, that maybe the robe was on him in chapter 24.
That is not an unreasonable interpretation of chapter 24 in that. I hadn't considered that being a direct delineation.
Why from this would you denote that?
It's, it seems to me he's paying greater deference to Saul's anointed authority. He's not touching him. Maybe the emphasis isn't there, and maybe it's, I could see cutting off the robe while the robe was in the dark, lowered or whatever, which would be certainly a more daring move. But it's also, messing with somebody's clothes, even if they're not aware that you're doing it, is still closer. I think this is more respectful.
I would definitely agree with that, and I wasn't actually going quite that far down the rabbit hole. I was thinking more of, so at this point in chapter 24, Saul basically bumbles into where David and his men are hiding, right? And David's just standing there, and Saul walks in and drops his drawers, effectively. Okay.
This one, David seeks him out.
This one, David goes to where Saul is, specifically. Okay. And those are two different situations. The one just is a bit of perchance circumstance, which we know God's in full control of, and then the other one, he's actually taking an active act in going to Saul in this instance.
Yeah, God's in full control.
I would love to know if, in the earlier instance, if David was aware that the army was coming in close and he was hiding in the cave hoping they would pass by. Because that to me would be a huge delineation from this. which I think is interesting because it comes right after the Abigail. We talked about how proactive Abigail was.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm seeing him being really proactive, and it reminded me of him with Goliath.
Yeah.
It really kind of gives you, because the stories are so similar, and we have the other one right in the middle, it kind of leads to that.
Yeah.
Because before, he was like, okay, let's hide out in the cave, so all the guys will pass by.
Yeah.
We won't encounter them at all.
Yeah.
Then he sees, hey, we're gonna go encounter this guy, Nabal, but there's somebody proactive coming, and he sees how the Lord works through him, and maybe that.
Did anybody look up and see how far away these two places are?
Nope.
So from the cave in 24 versus this location here? It's
I
about-
just know they were both in the same mountain. So
It's about
maybe
5 miles.
I was gonna say
Oh,
6
wow.
miles, but-
It's about 5 miles to the northeast of the cave. It's really not far at all.
Same place.
Yeah, really the same place. Which also, I got thinking to myself, well, if Saul's group of 3,000 guys had to camp here and fall asleep, did they not do that the previous time too? It's the same distance, same walk.
Maybe.
Maybe they started in the afternoon.
Yeah, I don't know what time it is.
Whenever Saul got riled up. Yeah.
Okay, it seems to me that this time is more of a slap in the face to Saul than the other time, because he took provisions that you would need in the wilderness. He took the spear and the jug of water from Saul. I mean, it was,
I kind of see it the other way. I kind of
Yeah, I'm
see it.
actually going to disagree with you.
I kind of see it Eric's way on this. I think he found a way to make the same point he made the first time, without
cutting
even
off.
the possibility of coming off as aggressive
Yeah.
in any way.
Because in the first time he did something symbolic of attacking his authority.
Right.
Saul's authority as the anointed.
Authoritative
By
robe.
trimming off the end of the rope.
And I think that speaks to the importance of what you were saying. Like this shows a progression from the first story to this one.
And this is the whole part of this story is David's growth.
Yeah.
David getting closer to the Lord and seeing
Yeah.
what the Lord wants from him.
I agree.
So that's why it's kind of, it shows that progression.
Yeah.
So he goes down to the camp with the two guys, Abishai, and says, "Hey, I'll tell you what, let's go down there and let's see what's happening. I want to see what colored pillow Saul's sleeping on or whatever." Abishai says, "Okay, I'll go with you." All right. Does anybody know exactly who Abishai is? He shows up in 2 Samuel as well. He's kind of a significant person. He is the son of son of David's sister. Okay, and Joab is his brother, and they're the two that basically take on they split into two groups, and they take on the 33,000 Syrians that show up in 2 Samuel. And that's in chapter 10, so that'll be much of
That's where he gets killed and then Joab all take off about it.
I knew what you said. Sorry. Okay.
Going down
He
the
didn't say
rabbit
it in a very reserved way. Didn't he?
Yeah, I'm trying not to.
It was very unpeace-like. I wasn't sure.
So
I don't think I've ever, after Pete said something, I don't think I've ever said, what?
I never had to ask you what you said.
I kind of felt I was talking over you, so I was like, maybe you were going there. I'm not going to say it.
Well, you let the guy leave for a week. And
Yes. I find it interesting. What is the name of the other guy he brought with him?
Ahimelech.
Ahimelech.
There's all kinds of
And we know this from who? How do we know the name of Ahimelech?
that was the priest, right?
The name of the priest that Saul killed. I wondered to myself instantly, is David hauling Ahimelech, this guy named Ahimelech, around because his name is Ahimelech, and it's like a reminder, I best not do something stupid? I couldn't let that pass, because there's not very many.
It must be a name like Bob.
Yeah.
You know, just, you know.
Bob the Hittite.
Well, everybody's named Ahimelech Bob.
I think here we're identifying the Hittite. When you look through David's mighty men, a large number of them are not Israelis.
Mm-hmm.
That's the point that I made.
So I think, I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry, I didn't say that. That's what I wrote down.
Yeah,
That's what stuck out.
You didn't actually say it.
Okay, I was going to say,
Sorry.
but
He gets sensitive
yeah.
when you step in front of him.
See, that's why I said that quietly. I thought you
Oh,
were gonna get
goodness
sensitive.
gracious. Oh, you boys.
But, it's part of Israel being a light to the nations. And David apparently is not just collecting Israelites, but he's collecting.
And he's taking them, really taking them in.
Yeah.
Like, he only chose 2 guys to get this close with, it seems. It seems like it was these 2 guys that he said, hey, somebody want to go with me. And one of those guys is not even Israeli.
Yeah.
And I think that just speaks to how God's growing him as a leader. He's starting to understand heart more than perception and the nation, spiritual Israel as opposed to technical Israel, political Israel.
Yeah. You can also see it as an extension of, Jesus talking about the Gentiles, and bring that in as well. That it has less to do with being a natural Israeli than it does your heart and what you're doing.
I think it also reflects the concentration. The 70, the 12, the 3. There are circles and there are people he's really building into.
Yeah, right. I think this speaks to really him growing as a leader.
Very
The
much
fact that he wants to take somebody with him, that's a good leadership move.
Yeah.
He's pouring into these guys.
And a genuine leader doesn't say, hey, go in there and take Saul's spear. A genuine leader says, hey, let's go over there and take Saul's spear.
And when does David get in trouble later?
When he sends somebody else to do dirty
When he
work.
sends people out to do the work and he said no.
Exactly.
When it's the time of kings to go to battle, he was at home looking at Bathsheba.
So they sneak into the center of camp, which apparently every member of this elite chosen group of warriors is sleeping. What's interesting to me is there's, which is part of what he gets onto Abner for, is there are no lookouts or anything. Everybody has fallen asleep. That what makes me think that David knew something was up. Because he walked into this group of 3,000 people. He knows who Abner is. Abner is the guy that walked him into Saul when David came back with the head of Goliath. Him and Abner know each other. So David has to notice that there are no lookouts. Nobody's paying attention to anything. Everybody is sleeping. So that makes me think that David, being as aware of his environment as he is, would know that something is up. So they sneak in, and Abishai pleads with David. So they find Saul, right, lying down, and he's got the spear. His trusty spear is always close by, near his head there, and then he has the jug of water. And Abishai says, hey, here's your chance. Let's go for it. Now the Lord has delivered him to you. Yet again, I heard about that one a couple times ago. Remember when he walked in and he turned off stuff? Now's the time to do it right. The Lord has delivered him again. What did you guys get out of that?
It's a temptation, isn't it?
The guy wasn't wrong. God delivered him
Very much so.
into David's hands.
Yeah.
But it's a subtle temptation.
I don't even think it's subtle. I don't think David considered it subtle at all. So I think when David shows up and he sees what's going on, he understands
God has given him a choice.
the full nature of what's happening here, and the Lord is presenting him with a choice. And it is a temptation, because answering into that choice would be a sin, right? Because he knows Saul is the anointed. But is Abishai in the wrong here?
No, not at all. No.
No. I don't put anything
I don't
against
think
Abishai
that,
here.
in reading that, David shows no anger or anything at him. He says, no, you know what?
I do wonder at what level they had this conversation.
I know.
Is it-
They're standing right on top of him.
Hey!
He's right there.
I'll tell you, and I won't have to go twice.
I have to do it twice. Nobody will wake up just one time.
Now that's a heavy commitment. Because it's gonna make noise
Yeah.
to stab a dude through.
And you're standing in amongst the 3,000. Yeah. So I really like Abishai's heart here, and Abishai knowing that David is reluctant to act against Saul, doesn't even say that Saul should do, or that David should do it, right? Abishai says, I'll do it. I'll step in for you and do what needs to be done.
Because I'm sure he was around last time when
Yeah.
David said, no, we shouldn't strike the Lord's anointed.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
So
right, maybe you shouldn't. I got you.
You're right.
You shouldn't, I'll
have
do
done
it for you.
Yeah.
But now, I still can't help but to wonder if the fact that Saul is David's best friend's father plays into it at all.
I don't think it does because of what David says. David, this is what I love about this story. This is my favorite part of the entire thing.
Yes, it's next
This
line.
time, when the opportunity presents itself, there's no him hawing around, there's no thinking about it and moving forward and having to pull back. As soon as the opportunity is there to take matters into his own hands, his immediate response is, nope, that's God's job.
Yeah.
It is not
And
my
he
job.
says, God's going to take care of it, whether he dies, or he goes out into battle. and
Whether
he's
God
dead.
kills him directly, or he just dies of old age, or
Yeah.
he goes out in battle and doesn't come
God's
back.
What
gonna take
a,
care
what
of
a great piece of wisdom there.
Yeah.
See that again,
He doesn't
this
even
is
put
the
a box on
progression
what's gonna
of
happen.
David learning
Yeah.
and going to God more
Yeah.
and God speaking to him.
Even if Saul dies as an old man.
right,
this
that's
is
what he
what-
says.
yeah.
Even if he dies an old man,
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am,
it's
Casey.
going to happen.
I also think that Abishai shows a lot of discipline himself, because like he could be the guy, you take out the king.
I took out the enemy.
He could have done it first and then asked.
Yeah.
A lot of people
How,
are
how
trying
many,
to
how many
please
people
David
ask
to
in this
it.
situation, right?
Yeah.
Just do it.
Do first, ask for permission later.
Exactly. He's
Yeah.
not like Cindy.
Well, it wouldn't be hard for Abishai to think that's why we're here.
Yeah.
Why did we come down here?
Yeah.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah.
We knew it was Saul. Did we come to look at him? Why are we
Think
here?
of that. That's a great question.
Yeah, from Abishai's perspective, it's perfectly reasonable. Let's go.
Did you come down to pull a blanket up over her?
Oh, he was cold. Poor man with his toes. He lost his teddy bear.
For some reason, and I don't know why, but every time I read this, it makes me think of that scene in one of the Star Wars movies.
Here we go.
Luke.
Gonna need some more.
Be slightly more specific.
Okay.
There's a lot of Star Wars movies now.
Luke, come to the dark side.
Oh,
yeah.
yeah. And it is a temptation in that, right? Because, and that's where it applies to our life, because this is, and we talked about this when we did 2024. It was like when Satan said, tried the temptations of Christ, right? Hey, I will give you control over all of these nations. All you got to do is swear fealty to me. Okay? Now, Christ could have taken things in his own hand and done things, but that's not who Christ was. Thank the Lord. Okay? But David is having a very similar thing happening here. And it's that temptation that he knows who he's going to be. Right? What he doesn't know exactly is how it's going to happen. Okay? He really doesn't have any real clue as to how it's going to happen. All that he knows is that he cannot act out against the current anointed king.
And that is so hard.
It is.
When you know a specific point of your destiny, right? Well, however you want to say it. It's hard not to see every God-allowed opportunity as a positive, as something you should grab onto, without even really thinking about it.
Very much so. And I think this is kind of the real aspect of this, is we have to be very diligent about what we assign as God's will for us to reach the end goal. Okay? And that is incredibly significant, because David could have easily rationalized this out.
Absolutely.
Wasn't a problem at all. Many would have said, hey, you were amazing the first time. You let him go. He repented. It was very Christ-like the way you acted in this situation. You treated your enemy as a friend, and you gave him benefit of the doubt, and he had the opportunity to repent, go about his life. Now that he's come back, God's judgment on him. Here we go. Right? Come How many times are we supposed to forgive those that sin against us?
7 times 7.
Yeah.
As many as
Which means
Yeah. More than 2.
infinite amount.
Okay.
Not counting. Would you, I was just thinking also about simply Saul as an authority, and then would you parallel that with, you know, Christ, give to Caesar what is Caesar, give to God what is God's, and then Paul again later, you know, all governors in authority are set
Absolutely.
up by
That's,
God.
That's David's attitude.
Yeah, he sees Saul.
So it's not just the specific, it's the Lord's anointed here, but its authority period is established.
I think David is really truly holding on to that authority period because he knows that the Spirit is no longer with Saul, right? He knows that, and that's Jonathan confirmed that for him too. So they both have that understanding, and so that he knows that Saul is still being allowed to reign in that. So I would agree with that general.
Yeah, I would too. Here's where we have a real application for this. This is a very common thing that you will deal with in your life. And what you have to have is discernment to understand that if God has said, make up a rule, if God has said you are not to eat cookies, it doesn't matter how many people bring cookies to you, how many opportunities you have, how many people God sends cookies to you through. If the rule is don't eat cookies, you don't eat cookies. And that's where David finally is. And it's such a place of peace. He doesn't have to think about this.
Mm-hmm.
There's no mental gymnastics. He doesn't have to think it through. He's already thought it through with the first opportunity. He's already had to repent of the concept one time, and that was enough. And we need this kind of discernment. It doesn't matter how many open doors there. See, we like to look at open doors as God's blessing, His opportunity. It is, but it's opportunity for what? To discern whether you're supposed to take it or not. Still, if there's a rule against it, it doesn't matter how many times He gives it to you. You're not supposed to have it. And the important point is, let other people see and you choose right just because it's right. Abishai's attitude is perfectly logical, perfectly rational by the standards of the flesh. It's almost an absolute. And David's immediate reaction is no. That's not who we are. That's not what we do. Not even on the table. Don't even have to think about it.
And I think Abishai really represents another important aspect of people in our lives, and that's the overzealous friend.
Yeah.
All right. He's the guy that says, "Hey, Lord, this is the gift of the Lord. Take it. Do what you need to do. This is what He's called you to. Go."
Cheerleaders cause problems sometimes.
They go on some very.
I mean, I don't have any, but
I see a really close parallel to the time that it says Satan entered Peter when Jesus was saying he's going to be crucified, and Satan enters Peter and says, "Far be it from you," you know. I forget exactly the scripture, but you know what I'm talking about.
No, that's going to happen. Yeah.
But it's interesting because it says a battle between the flesh and the spirit, and it says clearly in scripture Satan entered Peter. It's not like he turned into a big monster. He just said something. That's not going to happen to you. Very subtle. And the mechanics of it, like God lets Satan do his will against Job.
absolutely. Because here, I was talking about this with somebody else today. Scripture tells us God cannot tempt. He does not tempt. He has a tool that He gives a certain amount of leash to when a temptation is what's best for us. And so He uses it. He allows it to be used. And so in this instance, which can always be the truth for us, the evil is presented as an opportunity. In our lives, the enemy is always going to look at that as a stumbling block for us. He's trying to get us to fail. God allows it because He sees it as an opportunity for victory. It's just two different perspectives. It's the same thing.
And it tells us that God never gives us more than we can handle. So He's going to allow us those things, but He knows we can handle it if we choose to.
That's right. Mm-hmm. That's right. But we need to know. It's hypothetical up until you have to make the choice.
Right?
After the last time, I'm sure David said, "I'm not doing that ever again." Well, now he knows. Now he knows he's legit, and that's a big deal. Now, really quickly.
Yeah,
There was kind of a rabbit hole I went down with this.
Yeah.
And I won't go, it's not like crazy deep or anything like that. But the point of David proclaiming confidence that it's not necessary for him to force anything to happen.
Yeah.
Like that really jumped out at me because it's such an easy trap to fall into. And so what I looked at was how the fact that he did that, you can trace that back to him being a guy who would know Scripture. In Deuteronomy, vengeance is mine and recompense. The foot shall slip in due time, for the day of their calamity is at hand, and the things to come hasten upon them. That's part of the Song of Moses.
Mm-hmm.
So he would have learned that song as a little kid, because that's what it was for. So this very thing that he says comes directly from that song. Like, not only do I have to force it, God's going to do it, and he might do it any number of ways. Mm-hmm. Okay, so he expresses that. And so then we have him saying it here. It gets recorded. His son Solomon in Proverbs says, if your enemy is hungry, give him bread to eat. If he is thirsty, give him water to drink. For so you will heap coals of fire on his head, and the Lord will reward you. And then Paul quotes it, the same concept in Romans, which we've met a million times. Repay no one evil for evil. Have regard for good things in the sight of all men. If it is possible, as much as depends on you, live peaceably with all men. Beloved, do not avenge yourselves, but rather give place to wrath. For it is written. And then he actually quotes Solomon. From the Proverbs. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. That's
See, this is where I got with last week when I was talking about Solomon got some of these nuggets from David.
Yeah.
From his life experience that he probably shared with them.
Yeah, absolutely.
The thing with Abigail, he learned from it. This is the outpoint of that. He probably went back and said, "Oh my gosh, that thing from the Song of Moses fits right in here." So he was learning and growing in the Lord and
passing it on.
Passing it on.
It keeps going.
Which I think it says something about that in Proverbs.
Somewhere. Train up a David in the way of the Lord.
I too had annotation here about vengeance must be God's, and you can leave it in God's hands. Let God handle this. You walk in faith and trust me. Is kind of the important point there.
Which is the easiest thing in the world, and the hardest thing in the world. It's hard to be patient.
Absolutely.
Well, the word patient comes from a word that means long suffering.
That's right.
So
We're all going to be patient. It's just to be patient with good praise or patient with ill praise.
Suffer, right? It's going to be suffering.
It's not going to be fun.
Yeah, it's not going to be fun. Scooting on, they pick up the spear in the water. They go across the hill, and David calls out to Abner, right? Instead of Saul. But why is this significant?
It's his job.
It's his job. A very interesting aspect. You can, again, evidence of the true growth of David. David doesn't say, "Hey, Saul, I got your spear. Okay, here's your weapon. How could you be so foolish to fall asleep and let an enemy take your weapon from you?" Right? That's not what he says at all. Because he would be guilty of the same thing he did in 24, right? He's attacking Saul's authority in that. But here, he goes to Abner, okay? And he rightfully attacks the authority of Abner and points out his failure to do the most basic things that he's charged with doing in keeping the king safe, right?
Ensuring there's watchmen.
Yeah. Not falling asleep when it's your job. Okay. There's a lot of implication in it that Abner should have at least stayed awake. All right. And there's an interesting aspect of that in especially for us in being attentive in the work that God has called us to, and not falling asleep when the most important times come. And so there's an interesting little nugget there on that.
Like the apostle falling asleep.
I was thinking about that too, yeah.
Can you not stay awake? Keep watching. It's been a long 5 minutes.
Come on, guys. take much longer. So, the issue that happens with Saul. How many feel that Saul is truly repentant here?
In the moment, I think he is.
For about 5 minutes.
It doesn't last.
But yeah, and you know, I'm not going to judge the heart of Saul as to how long that is. Really not. We know it's a long walk because they had to fall asleep when they got there, so it might have been a whole day.
Yeah.
But so what I find interesting about this is there's not the emotion in it, right? So in chapter 24, Saul has a very emotional response to the situation, right? In this one, it's not really so emotional. It's very matter of fact. And like, man, you're just the better man here.
Resignation.
And you know what? I'm sorry. And this epitaph that he gives of himself, and I have been the fool and erred.
Not only that, but then he says, you know, David, you're going to do great things.
Yeah.
You've got, you know, God's got a plan for you. This is basically the last interaction that Saul and David had.
To me, this is one of those things that is truly indicative of the fingerprint of the Lord, because we are both Saul and David in this story, right? We are Saul in that we too had a life of sin, right? And we kept going back to it. We struggle with sin in our lives continually and stuff like that. And it is by grace of the Lord, who would be the representation of David in this story, right? Jesus, in that you know, he didn't just lop our heads off. And whereas we were also David in being graceful to our enemies, and being patient on the Lord's activities, and waiting on the Lord for that which has been promised to us. You know, in this case, the second coming of Christ. And that allows me to finish only 15 seconds late, I think.
Well done. You're here. Lord, thank you so much for tonight. Thank you for this powerful message from your word, the golden nuggets that you provide every time we dig into your word. Amazement, astounding. What an amazing document you have provided for us to show us these truths, to show us how your truth never changes and it weaves throughout centuries of human history, millennials of human history. It's quite stark how perfect your word is. You record the things that we need to glean information from, and you saved it for all these years so we could read it here tonight and see how your truth, when applied, not just understood and known, but applied, changes things. And it sets things in motion that carry forward. We talk about generational curses sometimes. This is an instance of this attitude of David in this situation that is a generational blessing. He received this truth in that Song of Moses, and he knew that song back in chapter 24, but he didn't act according to it completely. And he felt the weight and the conviction of that, and he confessed, and he repented. And this time, he immediately does the right thing according to what he knew to be true. And so he was blessed in the moment, and it looks like this has ended for all practical purposes, the literal feud between he and Saul. Now maybe even Saul is resigned to it's going to play out how it's going to play out, but I'm not going to beat that guy. And so there's a blessing right there in him acting according to your word, according to your will. But then we've got the record of his son taking that truth in and writing it down for people to understand. And then we even have the same truth recorded in the New Testament. And you just keep reiterating things that we really need to know. And I appreciate that so much. Thank you for your word, Lord. Thank you for the opportunity to look into it tonight. Thank you for Mike and the work that he put in. Thank you for the conversation we've had tonight. I'll never forget the first time I ever visited this church. It wasn't even a Calvary Chapel then, but there were interesting things taught and talked about that day. And I left there thinking, oh, there are still interesting things to talk about when it comes to the Bible. I had no idea because I didn't grow up in a church that did that. And so I thank you for this church. I thank you for the heart that you've given these people to study your word and to take truth from it and talk about it and apply it to our lives. By the power of your Spirit, may we do just that. Help us to apply these things. Help us to be light out of the dark world by applying these things. And may we pass it on to our children and their children and their children forever. May you be glorified in it all. It's in Jesus' name. God's people said,
Amen.
Amen. Love y'all. If you're watching online, you have the link to the Zoom meeting. Please join us for that. It begins immediately for prayer. If not, we'll see you Sunday. But until then,
Love God, love everybody else.